Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, improve, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can scale, grow, and thrive. And with that, it's very appropriate for me to introduce today's guest, which is Felix Velarde. Hi, Felix.
Hey, Adi. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Jeremy Wise from Rise 25 for introducing us. So Thank you, Jeremy. And then we found out before the podcast that we have another connection. So would you like to give a shout out to that connection?
Yeah, Todd Taskey, who is a broker in one of the industries that I'm from. My background is marketing agencies, digital tech, and Todd is he's brilliant. He's a broker who's he's spoken on a couple of stages for me at events that we've put on in the US, and he's just he's a really, really nice, thoroughly nice man. So I'm glad we have him in common, Adi.
Absolutely. Well, he's definitely, I did a great podcast with him, and I was also a guest on his podcast. So we're going to include those episodes in the show notes because he's definitely very knowledgeable and knows what he does. So absolutely. Well, Felix, now it's your turn. So let me introduce you. So, I love people that actually walk the walk, and that's what you do. You had agencies, you sold them, you grew them, you sold them. You wrote a book, Scale at Speed, which now it's the second edition bestseller. And the 2Y, and you're the founder of 2Y 3X, meaning 3X your business or scale your business 3X in 2 years. So 2Y 3X. And then on top of it, you also have an acquisition company where you acquire usually those agencies that went through to your 2Y 3X program, and you acquire them. So this is, and then the bio goes on. So I'm going to let you tell us more about yourself because it's absolutely incredible. So tell us.
So I started my first business because nobody would give me a job when I was in my 20s. And I was a rebel, and I just thought I could do everything my way. And then I spent many, many years trying to do it my way and having some success. Actually, the businesses were really great businesses from a culture point of view and from the services and products that they provided. But I couldn't scale them. I couldn't figure out how to grow them past a couple of million, 2 or 3 million. I could never get past those kind of barriers. And I tried really, really, really hard, and it became more and more frustrating. I'd get a business to 2 million, and then I'd bounce back, and I'd get down to 1.7, and then I'd try again to get past the 2 million. Then I'd bounce back to 1.8, and try again to get to 2 million, and I just couldn't do it. And it took me years and years and years to figure out how to break through those ceilings, those barriers, and part of it was because I was egotistical and arrogant, and I didn't think I needed help. And part of it was because there are systemic barriers to growth, and the barriers to growth are very, very predictable. And, one of those is about systems and processes, and one of those is about people and culture, and one of those is about scalability and so on. And happy to talk more about them, but I found it really incredibly frustrating. It wasn't until 20 years into my career as a founder, serial founder by then, I'd had 6 agencies of my own. I was CEO of a group of companies. We had 12 companies in the group. That I kind of finally dawned on me what was going on and how to scale up.
Interesting. Okay, well, we're definitely going to talk about what you found and how to scale. But I like that first point that you made in terms of being arrogant or thinking you already know it all. How does that act as a barrier for you to actually be able to expand?
Well, it sounds really kind of dumb. It's common sense, right? In my case, common sense always came from other people. I never had any common sense myself, and common sense always comes from your partner, right, or your mum or whatever. And for me, it was never intrinsic. But with hindsight, and hindsight is a wonderful thing. But with hindsight, um, if you don't ask other people how to do some stuff that is prior art that other people have already spent decades figuring out how to do, then you are destined to be doing it yourself by trial and error. And some of those things are really basic, like how to manage people, right? Or how to delegate. These things, I shouldn't have to work it out for myself. Even though, I'm smart and I think I'm capable of inventing new things all the time. The reality is, I'm not smart enough to come up with the right solutions first time. It'll take me, in my case, decades before I figured out some of the right solutions. And really, the reality is that most of the good solutions are already out there in great books like Good to Great by Jim Collins, or, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, or, there are thousands of really great books about how to do basic stuff in business. And I wish I hadn't been so dumb and short-sighted that I would have opened my eyes and read some of these great books at the beginning of my career, because it would have saved me 10 years of trying to figure it out for myself. And nobody's that smart. I certainly wasn't that smart to be able to do it. And it wasn't until I finally swallowed my pride and asked somebody else, "Oh, how do you do this?" Or I finally listened to somebody who said, no, you should do a spreadsheet. The light bulb started going off, and I realized that actually business was not why I was in business. Why I was in business was to do great creative work, and business, the acts of doing straightforward business process and business management and motivating teams and so on, they were the basics that would allow me, if only I could get the basics right, to fly and do great creative work, or have great products or great services, or have fun at work and a great culture. Those are the great magic things, right? The processes and the systems and the ways of doing things, and how you delegate properly, and how you manage things properly, and how you get processes and workflows happening. All of those things, you shouldn't be inventing yourself. You need to go to an expert. You need to find somebody who already knows how to do it, get them in, plug them in, get them sorted. So that was what was holding me back. And as I say, it took me far too long to get over myself and actually ask for outside help.
Interesting. That's great. And that's very true. It just expedites the entire process if you actually ask for that outside help and use it. Absolutely.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
And now I teach and write books and do all of that kind of stuff. And
now you became the authority, which is awesome, because now you're sharing your knowledge.
Well, yes, I mean, it's somewhat of a surprise. Certainly a surprise to my partner. Yeah, I mean, it turns out that I'm an expert in scaling, and I've scaled more companies. I had, as I say, 18 of my own at the first part of my career, and then, or 6 that I founded, and then another 12 in a group that I was CEO of. And then since then, for the last 9 years or so, been running 2Y3X program, which is a 2-year program that triples revenue or triples value, depending on what you really want. And so, we've had dozens of companies coming through that all over the world. And so we've seen at firsthand what processes are required in order to shortcut all of the crap and just get on with laying the foundations for scaling your business.
That's amazing. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about, first of all, I'm interested to know from your experience, what are some of the mistakes that business owners make or entrepreneurs make that is preventing them from scaling?
Well, the first one is believing that they are it, that they're the one and only source and font of all knowledge, right? Most businesses have one bottleneck, and that bottleneck is at the top. And that bottleneck is there because you invented your business, you bought your business, you know how to run it best, you know all the answers. If somebody comes up with a problem, you've probably seen it before, so you can come up with the solution to it. And so you become this reference point for the rest of the business. And it doesn't matter if you've got 3 people working for you or 300 people working for you, they will all come to you when there's a problem and ask you what the solution is. Or they'll say, boss, what's the plan? And because you're the boss, you have to come up with a plan because, I'm damned if I'm letting anybody else come up with a plan. What? I didn't start my own business. I don't run my own business so I can have a boss and answer to somebody else, right? So we become this bottleneck. And it's a sister problem to the ego problem, right? It's got to come from me. And when you're the bottleneck, no matter how good you are at delegating, the pyramid always stops at the top with you. Then all of the things that you've ever delegated downwards into this great pyramid of a business that you've got come back up to you for validation and for approval. So most of us can't really handle more than 5 things at once, right? I mean, people joke about multitasking and so on, but the reality is our brains aren't really wired to handle more than 5 things or to hold more than 5 things in control at the same time. So if you've delegated 6 things, in order for you to pay attention to the 6th thing, you've got to drop the 1st thing. And then when you delegate the 7th thing, you've dropped the 1st and the 2nd thing. And so to switch back to the 1st thing or the 2nd thing, you've got to change your brain altogether and come back, drop the 6th and 5th things. So you're constantly, you're never able to actually pay concerted attention to all of the things you're juggling. And there's a great book by Elder Shafir and Mulanathan called Scarcity. And it talks about the bandwidth tax. And the bandwidth tax is if you've got too many things to think about, then you're not going to be able to think brilliantly about any one thing.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Definitely that bottleneck off the top. So what other errors or misconceptions or mistakes have you seen that entrepreneurs do when they are trying to scale, want to scale, but are not successful at?
Well, partly it's because of their bandwidth. They only tend to do 1 or 2 scaling things at a time. And the problem is most people don't have a great process for de-risking change. And scaling requires change. It requires transformational change. And one of the problems when you're only able to do 1 or 2 things is that you can only therefore grow by 10% or 20%. And if you haven't de-risked the changes that will require 10 or 20% change in your business, then if one of those things fails, then you're down to 10%. And if the wind blows the wrong way in the economy, then you're stagnant. And so you've tried a couple of things and it didn't work. And so everybody in your culture says, well, change doesn't work. Therefore, we're not going to tolerate change anymore. And that seeps into you, no matter how good an entrepreneur and how driven you are. Eventually, you lose heart and you lose faith in your own ability to drive change. So change requires a critical mass in order to be able to do many transformational things at the same time. And
so how do you de-risk change?
Well, that's, I mean, I think that's one of the most fundamental pieces of scale at speed and the 2x3x process, but it's also the most boring, right? And you de-risk change by doing critical thinking, from many different angles and testing risk. Okay. Now, the program itself is predicated on recruiting a team of people who are the superstars in the business and getting them to think through every single change that might be required in scaling. And I can talk about that forever. But this team sits around and says, okay, so
give an example. Like, tell us a story. Like, how with an example will always helps.
Okay, so say you've got a mixed bag of employees. You've got some A players, B players, and C players, right? And your A players, 20% of your team is A players, and 60% is B players, and 20% is C players. C players are the disengaged, right? They're the people that you don't want in your business, really, but we put up with because we can't be bothered to get rid of them. And C players, by and large, they just don't share your core values. That's why they're C players. If they shared your core values, they'd be B or A players. So if you want to change your culture so that it is only A players and possibly B players, you need to change your hiring process, right? So if you need to change your hiring process, what do? How do we change it from our great gut feel interviewing, we'll take them out for a drink and we'll see if they're a culture fit and all the usual ways of doing woo-woo style recruitment. There's a great book called Who, the A Method of Hiring, and it's by Jeff Smart and Randy Street. And it's a process for how you hire superstars. So, right, so you've decided you are only going to hire superstars from now on. You say to somebody on you've gathered this team of your A players in your business, and this is the team that's going to create the change and do the transformational changes that are required to scale your business. And what you've decided collectively that one of the tasks is revolutionize your hiring process. So one person in that team volunteers to do it, and you give them 3 months. You say month 1 is research. And month 2 is prototype, and month 3 is implement, if the prototype works. So already we've created a de-risking process. So that one person says, okay, right, I'll go off and I'll read Who, the A Method of Hiring, and I'll ask all of my competitors and my peers and my mates what they do, and I'll go out and I'll do some research, and I'll come back and I'll bring all of that research together with some recommendations, and I'll present it to my peer group of superstars in the business. And you all sit around and you do some critical thinking and you say, what will work for us? You come up with a solution in month 1. And in month 2, you prototype that solution. We'll run this new process on our next 3 hires, okay? And if it works, fantastic. Now you roll it out, and this is now the way that we do hiring from now on in our business. And that's a transformational change.
Right.
It's been de-risked because first we've done a bunch of research about what works and what doesn't work and what might work for us and what might not work for us. We've then done some critical analysis in this team, what we call the Growth Lab team. And this team has basically troubleshooted it from lots of different angles and come up with a potential solution. And somebody has now trialed this solution for a whole month. And at the end of that, it's either worked or it hasn't. If it has worked, we rolled it out. We've now done a de-risked process for implementing a radical change to our business. Now, if you multiply that with, say there are 5 people on the Growth Lab team, that's 5 different changes you can do per quarter in your business, radical changes. That's 20 a year, which is very, very different from the 1 or 2 things that you're going to do that are going to increase your revenue by 10% or 20% by doing them in a linear 1 at a time basis. And so that's the magic of the process.
Interesting. Very interesting. Wow. Okay. So that is definitely one aspect of scale. So we started with scaling that is needed. So we started with the problems or the bottlenecks or the pain points. So you said, okay, so the business owner feels like they are the only ones who can do the job, right? How do you demystify it? How do you handle it with your clients? How did you handle it within yourself? I'm sure you had that feeling as well when you started your first business.
Oh, completely. I mean, for me, it took me 20 years, right, to figure it out for myself, because I should have listened to other people in the first place. But it took me 20 years to figure it out for myself. The way that, when clients companies come into the 2Y3X program, or they read the book and they ask questions. And it's really interesting because I get lots and lots of emails from people who've read the book and say, how do you implement this bit? Or what's the rationale behind that bit? And so I spend quite a bit of time actually answering people's emails. It's fun. But people who come into the program, they have a goal, they have a financial goal. And so we basically explain to them that if they're the bottleneck, then we can increase the bandwidth of that bottleneck by 5 times just by identifying in their businesses 4 other superstars. And we bring them together, as I say, we call it the Growth Lab team. We bring this team together and then we say, okay, listen, if we tell you all what to do, you're going to go, yeah, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work for us because we're slightly different, because we're unique and we're snowflakes, right? Because we all are. And of course, if I tell you what to do, it's not going to work. It's not going to work for you. It'll work for me, but it's not going to work for you. So we get that team to co-create the plan. And our job is just as facilitators. We say, right, set some goals 3 years away, then figure out in year 3 what you have to be doing, what has to be true in year 3 to reach those goals. Then let's figure out what you need to be doing in year 2. And then let's figure out what the 20 tasks are going to be in year 1. Right? And if they'd come up with that plan, it's their plan, and all we have to do is step out of the way and provide some guardrails and make sure that they don't go off piste, right? The owner becomes part, or the founder becomes part of that Growth Lab team, and suddenly the pressure's off their shoulders. The yoke comes off, and over the first couple of quarters, they'll see the transformation that happens when everybody in the business is lifting the business up, not just them. It becomes much less stressful. So it's a process. It is a system, even though it's a very light touch system and it's not a directive system, but it's driven by the people. And that's where I think what makes it so fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's the involvement, the buy-in. I agree. One of the things that I also seen in terms of overcoming that obstacle of, as a business owner, I'm the only one who knows how to do it, is to really develop systems around it. It's really do the knowledge transfer, because a lot of times, as you said, the owner is the one, the founder is the one who founded the business, and they founded it on some kind of a technology or some kind of an idea or some kind of a method that they feel that, I know it happened to me before I started scaling. I felt like, well, I know how to document processes and procedures. I know how to extract the information. How am I ever going to teach anybody else how to do it? That's part of my superpower or part of my magic touch or whatever it is, right? And then I realized, of course, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to be able to help as many businesses I would like to help if it's only me all the time wearing all the hats. And that's what I realized. Okay, so how do I distill that information? How do I figure out what is that superpower? What is that magic that I create, right? And then write it up, create videos, and teach others, and then hire correctly, to your point. Hire the A players, hire the people that have similar personality, hire the people that have the right personality. Whatever it is, it's the hiring process itself. And really refine that hiring process. And by the way, I really like that book you mentioned, Who. But you have to refine your own process and create it. So when you hire people, you hire correctly. So I agree that it's the systematization, right? It's the creating the infrastructure that will actually help create that scalability.
Yeah, I my own view is that if we are too rigid about telling people how to do things, you lose imagination, you lose resilience and adaptability and sustainability, right? If you can create a framework that allows people to think individually and for themselves, that allows people to be inventive and entrepreneurial, then you get magic. And I think one of my biggest learnings in being a CEO was people aren't really looking for my instruction, right? They want my knowledge, yes, but they don't want me to tell them how to do things.
Right.
What they want is permission. And so you're right, the creating the knowledge base and the thing that you can share that allows people to, I don't know, understand it, to grok it, right, and to really get the sort of prior art and the prior learnings, so that they can then make their own decisions.
Absolutely.
Within a framework that supports the business. That's powerful.
Very much so. It reminds me, I mean, I have this analogy that I really like, is kind of like, let's say you have a small road, in an undeveloped, like a country road, right? Mm-hmm. And you're trying to drive your car, and your car is not, it's not a car that can drive on it. And then you spend all the time fixing the car and figuring out and all that. I mean, it's kind of like until you get from one point to another. It takes you a long time, waste of time, right? So I look at it, okay, what we are doing is we're creating this amazing freeway where you can take your beautiful car and drive it and decide where you're going to go within the parameters, but it allows you to get there.
Yes.
Now, the analogy can go all the way to the other side. It's probably, we're not that far away from it, but it's like in the movie, I think it was a Minority Report, where they had like those freeways with cars on them, and they cannot move because you just get in the car and you don't drive, but the car drives you, just tell them where to go. There's no imagination, no decision. The car makes all the decisions for you. So that's the pendulum swinging to the other side. That's what you were describing in terms of the rigidity, in terms of no imagination. But if we really look at it as the vehicle, the framework, that then you can put whatever car you want, but it gives you it allows you to put the best car there is out there, the fastest, the best, and allows you to take it and drive it in the way that you want. That's what we want. But then you also empower others to do it. You are not the only one who can do it.
Completely. And it's also it's related to this idea of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hire people who think differently to me, but who are experts in the things that my business needs.
Right.
So I'm going to need a sales expert and a customer satisfaction expert and a product quality assurance expert and a bookkeeping expert and so on, right? I need a whole bunch of people around me with different talents, different ways of thinking. And if I can get them all to focus on each of the changes that I want, then I'll get lots of different perspectives. I'll be able to think that I'll be able to test things rigorously. But expertise is, if I'm an expert in, I don't know, I used to be an expert in data in data and digital strategy, right? I was an expert in CRM strategy for a while, 15 years. But I wasn't an expert in client service. I wasn't an expert in production or coding or anything like that. I needed other people around me with those things. But I needed us all to be managed by a framework, because there needed to be a system by which I could say to each of the other experts, okay, here's my bit, I need your bit. Where does the product go, right? So systems are critical for making sure that workflows happen, for example,
right,
in a manageable and predictable way, so that I can be creative and not have to think about all of that stuff. I want it just to work. And I guess in your area of expertise, that how to make it work is your sweet spot, right? It's your superpower. It's not mine by a long way. Mine is how to motivate people, right? I can get people to believe, and I can get people to invent and all of that kind of stuff. But I need systems and frameworks behind me in order to allow the wonderful progressive ideas to flow. And that's what Scale at Speed is. It's a framework. And some of the systems in the book are there to enable critical thinking and radical transformational change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It all goes together. So I think, to summarize, I mean, I'm sure we can talk about this for hours, but the key takeaways that I can see is first of all, know that there is something to learn and seek expert advice. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to figure it out yourself. Hire people that can help you, because the return on investment is that you're going to just scale faster and you'll be able to afford to pay for that expertise. And the second thing is, right? I mean, don't be your own bottleneck. Just make sure that you actually are able to scale, hire people. And the third thing, which was very smart, is de-risk the change. Meaning if you want to scale, you will have to do either more of the same of what you are doing, but in a different way, because there will be a limit of how much you can do it the same way. Or it can require something new, but you don't want to introduce something new to something that is working. So de-risk it by actually use this control group, or do it controlled, investigate, research, think, create a plan, execute, measure it, and then if it works, then introduce it to the entire group and make it part of the entire group, right? Absolutely. I mean, those definitely were great takeaways from, I'm sure, many others. So Felix, if people want to find out more, what should they do? How should they contact you? What is the best way?
So 2y3x.com will tell you all about the program. Scale at Speed is available all over the world in all formats. The second edition just came out in the US in Kindle and audio, Audible, and paperback. It's just about to come out in Chinese. So it really is available everywhere. And feel free to write to me. Again, 2y3x.com. If you use any of the contact forms, somebody will get the right things to me. I now have a whole bunch of people who are much better at running 2y3x than I ever was, and they've scaled it globally, and it's brilliant. But I do respond to emails, and I do respond to questions, and I'm always happy to help.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. That was a great conversation.
Thanks, Adi. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.